Hello, everybody, and welcome. Remember, this is not a news show. If you want news, go somewhere else. This is a political platform for talking points. With that being said, welcome to THB, or That Heathen Bastard, where we will be discussing sociopolitics, mostly politics, and not so much socio. Anyway, for today I wanted to discuss, and I have not been able to do these for a while because I've been suffering from anxiety and depression and illness. So I apologize. I still got a little bit of a cough. Damn respiratory infections are very stubborn. Anyway, today I want to discuss why the left doesn't understand the right. And keep in mind, I'm going to be expanding on this concept quite a lot in this video. So I'm going to be trailing off into some areas that are not necessarily or strictly part of the core discussion. Regardless, why the left doesn't understand the right. Now, to understand the right, we have to understand that there is, generally speaking, a spectrum of center, middle, solid red, meaning unmoving, unshifting, conservative, right-wing only, followed by, far-right extremism. As per examples, we'll say more centrist right, sort of center-right. We'll probably say Marco Rubio. Right, we'll have that be an example of more of a center-right. Then you move a little more closer to solid red, conservative only. You know, red is the best, right-wing, blah, blah, blah. We'll say Rush Limbaugh. We'll say Rush Limbaugh. Perfect example. And then from there you come over more to the far right. And there we're probably talking Richard Spencer, someone more extreme, QAnon. Now keep in mind, not all far-righters are a racist type, like Richard Spencer. There are plenty of far-right people who are less racist and more conspiratorial, conspiracy theory type, like an Alex Jones or QAnon. QAnon being neo-satanic panickers who think that Michelle Remembers is a legitimate book, and that all those accusations from the 80s and 90s were real, and blah, 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 and that there's satanic pedophile cultists that eat children in the government. They're wacky. They're a whole nother breed of wackiness. And you're wondering, wait, doesn't the left accuse QAnon of racism? Yes. And that's because the left basically accuses anyone they don't like of racism. That's their one-size-fits-all accusation. QAnon isn't even about race. QAnon is about conspiracies involving Satanists. They're like Junie Harper from that episode of King of the Hill, Halloween. That frickin' anti-Halloween chick that thinks that there's Satanists hiding around every corner, sort of Reds under the bed style. Only Satan, you know? Sort of paranoid, conspiratorial Christian who honestly should probably be on their antipsychotic meds, to be fair. Now, the whole red pill phenomenon, the talk about the red pill, that comes from the Matrix. You know, the red pill wakes you up to reality, blue pill keeps you asleep and in the Matrix. Well, generally speaking, I would say red pill is honestly the right-wing version of wokeness. Because the wokeness is far left, is a far left idea. It has many brands, and it's generally very orthodox and not really tolerant of any ideas being perpetuated that are against them in any possible way. They don't want to talk about it, they don't want to be reasoned with, etc. Red pill is really kind of the right-wing version of that. They think that there's red pillars think that there's sort of socialist conspiracies all over the place, and that it's all going downhill, America is dead because the left killed it, blah, blah, blah. sort of worrying about SJWs hiding under the bed or hiding around every corner. It more or less is the right-wing version of wokeness. I'm a no-pillar. I only see the world of politics through the lens of what is provable, demonstrable, and factual. I'll believe a conspiracy theory if there's evidence for the conspiracy. I'll believe that someone's bad because there's proof they're bad. I don't look at it through any lens other than what I can see as objective reality in some sense. But neither the wokeness nor the red pillars are really going to see it that way. So I'm surprised the left doesn't understand the right wing when you consider the fact that red pill and wokeness are kinda, sorta similar. And really, when it comes right down to it, political tribalism has a lot to do with the left's failure to understand the right wing. Mind you, that's not the central part of the issue, but that is part of it nonetheless. Is this tribalism where it's automatically right-wing good, left-wing bad, or left-wing good, right-wing bad. You're not able to really sit at the table and look at your opponent across the table and recognize a human being. Rather a generic, scary, shapeless, amorphous evil. A big bad wolf, as it were. Sort of the tribalistic response with the chest pump and the fist pump and all that. That is a significant barrier to the left understanding the right, or even vice versa. Generally speaking, it's been shown through quizzing and other testing that the right wing has a generally better understanding of the left wing than the opposite of the left wing really understanding the right. And keep in mind also that many leftists are reactionaries, and reactionaries don't do research. They're powered by emotion, not logic. Most right-wingers or conservatives are largely about facts and logic, for the most part. Like I said, there are emotionally driven right-wingers, there are conspiracy theorists, but tribalism is a major barrier. It has a lot to do with it. And the Democrats keep drumming it up because they think it'll get them votes. It'll get them hardcore partisan voters that will always support them no matter what. And so, of course, they drum up sort of that tribal response. And the mainstream media doesn't help because the MSM, with the exception of Fox News, every other news outlet is left-wing. And they're always trying to vilify the guys on 1-6 who are QAnon, or the Q Shaman, or really anyone even vaguely right-wing is automatically bad, automatically the enemy, etc., etc. It's sort of an informational feedback loop, where just about everywhere you go is a left-wing echo chamber, and you can't really say or do anything because everyone will turn on you. They're kind of like those people on the episode of Star Trek Return of the Archons, where this great socialist politician or dictator, however you want to look at it, named Landru, brings a bunch of people to this planet and then sets up a computer to regulate everything. And after he dies, the computer sort of takes on his persona and becomes him, and begins sort of absorbing people into his kind of collective communal identity. Sort of absorbing them, kind of like an early precursor to the Borg. And any time that any one of these people who has been absorbed into the whole that they call the body recognizes you as not part of the body, they basically turn on you and attack you. The left kind of reminds me of that quite a lot, actually. They sort of remind me of the Landruites from Return of the Archons on Star Trek. That is sort of what happens when you go into one of these leftist echo chambers and you say anything that's against their ideas. Even vaguely. Or just not in perfect lockstep. It's like, you're not in the body! You are not! And then they attack you. Verbally, of course, not necessarily physically. No, if they attack you physically, then they're probably fucking Antifa. But, the truth is, at the end of the day, leftists care more about winning than being right, as laid out perfectly by the fact that most of their arguments that I've seen are not particularly factually based. They're rhetorically based. They're based in ideology. They're based in perspective. Typical reactionary bullshit that you can expect. And it's really, at the end of the day, just about defeating people, not about being right. Which is why they typically use propaganda, because the purpose of propaganda typically is not to obscure the truth, but to demoralize, to convince someone that they're alone and helpless and got no one backing you up. It's sort of a psychological warfare tactic. And the mainstream media is just full of propaganda like this. It's just full of stuff like that. Because, again, it is largely not so much journalism as it is activism and programming people with certain perspectives to turn them against the right wing, against Republicans, against Donald Trump, against whoever they've decided their enemy is that week. Just go onto Twitter sometime and look at all the left-wing accounts, Joy Reid and other, blue check marks from the mainstream media, and observe their behavior. Just about everything they do is about defeating some scary other or person they've otherized. And generally it's how the Democrats operate. That's how many casual leftists operate. This is how progressives are. They're all about winning. They don't care about being right. Which is why also oftentimes when you face them with the facts, you trigger a cognitive dissonance. They shut down the argument. They shut down. They stop listening. They use lots of thought-stopping cliches. If they were worried about being right, then they wouldn't do any of that. They would change their views to fit the facts instead of changing the facts to fit their views. It's cognitive dissonance. It's about winning. What's interesting, however, is rightists, that is, people who are dedicated to the right wing only and far right causes, so we're getting back to sort of QAnon. They care more about conspiracy hypothesis than real practical facts and logic. They do a lot of the same thing when you mention how, say, Lawrence Pastor caused Michelle to have false memories, and the accusations of SRA were based on false memories and were not real. And the reason why all the children's stories were the same is because leading questions resulted in a cloning of the same false memory for each child. The inevitable response, of course, from a QAnoner would be to shut down, to ignore, to negate any further argumentation. Classic cognitive dissonance. They want to focus on conspiracy theories and ideas that they think they've uncovered about these supposed secret Satanists that they want to keep being like Junie Harper. And they care more about that than real facts and logic. Because that is, at the end of the day, that is the realm of extremism. This is how extremists are. They're tribal, they're unreasonable, they don't like reality, they like narrative, because the narrative feels good. A conspiracy theorist likes their narrative, and it feels good to them because they think they're special for having uncovered some deep, dark secret. And this sort of tribalistic response is why, largely, the left wing does not actually understand the right wing. It largely all comes down to tribalism and being laser-focused on far-right people and treating centrists and middle-right like solid red, like the Ted Cruz's and Rush Limbaugh's of the world, as being cut from the same cloth as QAnon. They're so focused on the extremists that suddenly everyone starts to look like them. It's kind of like this experiment I did a while back, that I read out of a book, about how if you imagine the image in your mind of a quarter, and you go outside looking around for a quarter, and you just keep that image in your mind, after a while, everything even vaguely quarter-like begins to look like a quarter. And I actually did that experiment in my mind, and my mind started imagining little pieces of gravel in the road looking kind of like quarters. They were almost practically turning into quarters. So if you've got that image of the right-wing extremists in your mind, then you're probably triggering the exact same effect in your mind. If you're so laser-focused on QAnon or Proud Boys, then suddenly everyone starts to look like them. Right? And I imagine if you did the same thing with the left wing, you'd do something similar. This is a huge barrier to understanding your interlocutor if you think that they all look the same. Now, if you want to ask about me, and there is a test. It's called the political pillars test. It's superior to the four quartered square. It's actually better. It is a very accurate test developed by IDR Labs, where you're basically given a set of 8 values or 8 pillars. You might want to call it the 8 values test. There's a total of 8. Typically, progressives have 2, libertarians have 1, conservatives have 5. And where I landed on my political pillars test was I got the 5 pillars of conservatism, and I had them all more or less in balance. I was still very much in favor of individual liberty, small government, and the market, but I understood necessarily the idea that authority and some market regulation was good. Now we get into another major barrier of where the left doesn't understand the right wing. And that would be progressive values versus conservative values. Progressives only have 2 pillars. They have care and fairness. Conservatives have care and fairness plus liberty, sanctity, and authority. And they all have their place in sort of that conservative spectrum. And because the left-wingers lack those pillars, they don't really understand them. And so they often just label the conservative care for those last 3 pillars I mentioned as a kind of fascism. As a kind of, you're just restricting care and fairness. When in reality, no, they're not. They're protecting sanctity, liberty, and authority, which are things that the left wing doesn't really seem to understand. That there's a moral authority in society and a greater sense of values, a sanctity, meaning things are sacred. They're part of the national identity, they're part of culture. You do not touch these things. And then, of course, individual liberty, which, in order to facilitate care and fairness to the level that progressives want to take it, you would basically have to eliminate or severely limit people's liberty. This is probably one of the reasons why many people are so concerned with the idea of socialism and socialism and communism, is because they're centralized systems with a general tendency to disregard individual liberty and freedom. And they're right to fear that. They're absolutely right. So moving forward, I wanted to talk about my political ideology. It's not just any old form of conservatism. It's something I'm working on. I'm creating my own political doctrines. I have them saved in some documents. I haven't updated them in a while. I did do some earlier videos when I first started here on YouTube and on BitChute of what I like to call reformed conservatism, which stands on a rejection of neoconservatism as well as sort of the paleocons, the earlier Nifty 50 styles, the 700 Club, if you will, where reformed conservatism is about honoring all Western civilization's traditions, including the pre-Christian traditions, as well as respecting per individual liberty, freedom of religion, and from religion, separation of church and state, etc., etc. It literally defends everything that outlined in the original Declaration of Independence and in the Constitution. Quite literally, formed conservatism is in the spirit of America as I have interpreted it. But it's a mostly, it's a very center-right ideology. Sort of somewhere between those examples I gave of like Ted Cruz and Rush Limbaugh. Where I'm not quite solid red. If the left wants to present something that's reasonable, I'll take a look at it and consider it. So I'm really more of like a slightly further right than, say, Ted Cruz. Right? We need to stay close to that center, to that Overton window, so we can stay reasonable. Because the further people tend to get away from that Overton window, the more extreme they become, the more QAnon, the more Antifa, the more BLM, the more Proud Boys they get, the more crazy, the more type they get. The center is sane and necessary. And in case you're wondering about my own political ideology, it is fully compatible, by the way, with populism, in case you were wondering. I would more or less be in alignment with the Trump populists, except maybe when it comes to the issue of religion. No one religion can be favored over any other, except by, of course, the practitioners of that religion. So, you're not going to see, like, Satanists worshiping God, but you are going to see a wonderful diversity, sort of like ancient Rome. The way it had so many different, each province had its own little belief system, and you got guys like Tacitus recording it and in codexes and so forth. But when it comes right down to it, the left does not understand the right because of tribalism, extremism, and not sharing enough of the same values. That is why they're so confused. And why they just automatically view right-wing as like fascism. It's because they don't understand. They're actually very ignorant and mostly reactionary. Now, to the point, center-right versus center-left. The difference there, in case you're concerned about centrism obscuring the sides of the spectrum, allow me to just say that the center-right and the center-left are actually very, very different. The difference can be amazingly subtle, but it is definitely there. For example, center-left is almost guaranteed to be pro-choice in regards to abortion. They're going to talk about the women's right to choose. They're going to say safe, legal, rare. They're going to say fund Planned Parenthood. They're going to say abortion is health care, blah, blah, blah. As one possible difference. Center-right is actually going to say that abortion, that the science has proven it is a baby. You are killing a baby. The doctor is committing a murder. It is a eugenics technique. Hitler liked abortion. He aborted Jewish babies. Margaret Sanger was into aborting black babies. She was a eugenicist. Right? And the thing is, I'm pretty sure you've already noticed how the center-left position is not factually based, but the center-right is. That's because, generally speaking, the center-left position is still one of emotion, as well as care and fairness. They have few facts to cite. In fact, they frequently, pro-choicers, have to dehumanize and demonize the baby in the womb in order to be able to kill it with a clear conscience. Pro-choice is pro-eugenics. Period. It's eugenicism. But they're still reasonable. You can still talk them out of it. We can still have that discussion at the table. Man to man, human being to human being. That's just one of the many differences between like center-right and center-left. So the being close to the Overton window does in no way obscure. It really is, at the end of the day, the center is about sanity and reasonability, as well as agreeing on certain points that would be held in common, such as liberty and freedom, care and fairness. So yeah, now you basically understand why the left doesn't understand the right. This is due to lack of not sharing enough of the same values and tribalism. And tribalism is the most relevant issue because right now we live in a dark era of American history where extremism and violence is just about around every corner. I mean, where I live, I'm an Antifa sandwich. I got them to the north of me and I got them to the south of me. To the north of me in Seattle and to the south of me in Portland. I live right in between Seattle and Portland. It's a major corridor. If they suddenly started making moves from one city to the next, they'd have to pass right through here. So we have to understand that extremism is very common right now. And that can further obscure the issue of the left trying to understand the right. So at the end of the day, if any leftists are watching, conservatives are not fascists. They're not authoritarians. We're not unfair. We just have a few more values than you do that you don't understand. Ask me to explain them to you sometime. I might just be able to pull that off for you. Anyway, thank you for watching and paying attention. I know this was a bit of a sort of a lengthy diatribe, but we needed to have this discussion. Someone needed to say it. Anyway, with that being said, tschüss, peace.